Dr. Rajeev comes from a mechanical engineering background and has pursued his Master of Sciences in Mechanical Engineering and a PhD in Material Sciences. So he has also completed his Global MBA from UNC Ken Flagger Business School. So he's an entrepreneur, business leader, currently working with a company called Calpine, who are into energy industry, headquartered in Houston, Texas. So he'll be explaining us today how geospatial analytics and drones can transform the industry needs and the opportunities what we have for the young generation and the professionals who are in the industry already. Thank you so much, Rajiv. So the stage is all yours. You can go ahead with your presentation.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. Is my audio clear?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let me start sharing my screen here. All right. You guys able to see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So thanks for the opportunity to share what I know and what I've been experiencing here in the United States, but also all over the world in the field of geospatial AI. So what I would like to do is provide an overall perspective, if you want to call that, in terms of how geospatial AI is being used in various industries. And then what are the opportunities, as Jayshankar pointed out. So just to recap, those are the two things that we will be focusing on. With that said, I want this to be a two-way communication. So with that said, I need to have some volunteers who I can pick on as we go through the presentation. And can I have some names? Who wants to provide any opinion? Again, think of it as mutual exchange of information, right? We are sharing what we know, but we also would like to see what others are thinking. So who can help? Any volunteers? Before I start picking anybody randomly. All right, so what I can do, let me go to the list. Maybe I'll go ahead and pick someone randomly. So I don't have the names here. What is the best way to get the names? Okay, here. Maybe I can pick on Kamala. Kamala, get ready for any feedback. And then I also can get opinions from Michael. Humdrum Michael Singh. Is he available? All right, so what we will do, we will, I'll probably pick a name here from this list and then we will go from there, okay? So let's move on with my presentation. So here is the outline. We'll start with quick objectives, what one can expect to get from this, and then followed by that, what exactly is geospatial AI? When you actually look at Google it, what do you find? What is a comprehensive definition? And then use cases, as I said. But the other part, would say, the later part of the presentation will be focused on what does it take to build a geospatial AI product-oriented company from an entrepreneurial perspective, as well as a business leader for an established startup. So we'll talk about that as well. And then finally, the most important thing I would call it is how do we prepare for the future, the geospatial AI future, and then followed by that any actions as well. Little bit about me. As Jayshankar pointed out, I grew up in southern India, and then I got my bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I came to United States to pursue my graduate studies. And I got my master's and PhD here, and then I worked in aerospace. I also worked in automotive startup in LA. And then I also worked in energy industry, specifically utilities, but I also have entrepreneurial experience in oil and gas. And currently work for Calpine. And what we do, we operate plants, power plants, geothermal and natural gas plants all over the country, about $25 billion worth of assets. It's a Fortune 300 company. So the revenues are in the range of $10 to $12 billion. And my goal is to optimize the value of the assets. What does that really mean, right? When you say optimization of value, we would like to gain more, right? Produce more from these machines by spending less. It's really that simple. How can I understand? How can I identify any weak links? How can I identify any plants that are not going to perform well? And then that is the business objective. How do we get there? We use a lot of data, 5-minute data. I would say hundreds of thousands of sensors over the fleet, all over the fleet that is sending the information, and then the goal is to synthesize that into something useful for the business. That's in a nutshell. So with that said, let's jump into what is geospatial AI. So that's where I started with. So when I started making the slides, I felt like, okay, I need to start high level into how is that being defined today. I would say it's emerging scientific discipline. It's emerging as most of these new technologies are, that actually combines innovations in various things. So the key is combination here. That's the reason why I highlighted it. And why is it important? Spatial science, artificial intelligence, data mining, high performance computing, all of those are already changing, right? In the last 5 to 10 years, every vertical there that I talked about that you can read here is changing. Sometimes even every week, if not every month, right? So the technologies are changing, the computational power is changing, the ability to mine data is changing. But now what we are talking about is combine all of them and then build a solution on the top of it, right? Build product solutions on the top of it. That is why you have to look at, if you want to be part of this, it's exciting. With that said, that is exciting. However, to be part of it, you got to have that mindset. You got to be thinking about it like that. It is an ever-changing field, fast-paced, but also be willing to learn about the new things and go from there. So combination of various things, and it's emerging. That is what I gather from this. Now, I would like to, before I go further, I want everybody to take their mobile phones or tablets or whatever device and go to this survey website, slido.com, and then enter this code, that website. And then I am going to release the tab here in a minute. Let me stop sharing for a minute and then I'll bring it back. Right, present in a new tab. That should probably work. Okay, I'm gonna bring the screen back, but in the meanwhile, please go ahead and get on Slido and start using Is everyone there on Slido? I'm going to give a few seconds. Slido.com and then use this number 435876. Again, 435876. If you want to use QR code, that's okay. If you want to go to website, that's okay. I'm assuming people are there. So who's going to volunteer? Can somebody tell me if you're there?
Yes, Rajeev.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. So now this poll should show up for you guys. And the question is, what are the possible geospatial applications that you can think of? And I want you to go ahead and select. All right, I see the responses coming in. Perfect. More. I like the participation. Nice. Perfect. So a lot of people are aware of pipeline monitoring, it looks like. And then methane emissions, I'm impressed. A lot of people also are aware of that. Methane emissions as a geospatial applications as well. Very nice. And agri-tech is another one. Jayshankar briefly touched on that. Okay, we'll probably give a few more seconds to see if there are any. Yeah, there are more coming in. Okay. So as you can see, pipeline monitoring, a lot of people are aware of that. By the way, this is multi-selection, guys. I know I intentionally didn't mention it. So if anybody wants to go back and reselect, if you know about more, feel free to select more. It's a multi-select type of poll. Nice. Great. Beautiful. So I think we got a pretty decent sample here. So people are aware of pipeline monitoring, people are aware of forestry, agri-tech, and protecting land assets is a newer thing. And I'm glad about 50% of you guys already know that. But as Jayshankar already covered, that is something where every citizen can take advantage of the technology and protect their hard-earned assets, right? So spread the word and do whatever you have to do, but I would say that is a good one. So with that said, I'm gonna stop this for now, and then let's go back to the presentation. We'll come back to this, by the way. So don't close the windows or anything. We will come back to this. People are waiting in the lobby, so Dilip, if you can take care of that. Okay. Thank you for your participation. That was very helpful. So since a lot of you guys talked about the geospatial AI application in oil and gas, let's talk about that briefly. And then how does it really help the industry and the business is where I'm focusing on. And as you know, this is Landsdoctor logo. So thank you for Landsdoctor team to help me to let me use that. But here is a application. The first thing is, as you can see, this is the waterway, seashore, where IOC, the Indian Oil Corporation, has the ability or has the requirement or need of transporting the compounds, the hydrocarbons, I would call it, across a 12-mile pipeline. I want to say, and this is in Kandla, Gujarat, by the way. This picture is in Kandla, Gujarat. This is a 12-kilometer pipeline, 12 kilometers actually. It's not 12 miles. I'm familiar with the system here, but it is kilometers. And this pipeline is located about 1.5 to 1.8 meter above the ground surface. So it's above the ground. That is the other thing. That's the advantage for an application like this. And it's continuously under manual surveillance. Think about that, manual. So somebody has to be there for the 12-kilometer pipeline, and then they also have day and night surveillance. So now the question is, when we were talking to the leaders at IOC, their point is that seems more archaic, right? If you can see the practice, since it's above the ground, what can we do to improve the business reason, if you want to call it, right? So what was done here? There was a image acquisition. So we use drones that go in a periodic basis. It can be in every hour, it can be 4 hours, whatever the frequency is that is decided by the leadership, day and night across 24 hours. And then it will go collect the data, and then it will, and then we actually collect thermal imagery. So that the reason why we picked thermal imagery is to distinguish between the humans versus the pipeline, meaning humans has a specific thermal characteristic that you can actually use to pick, and that is what we are using here. So once the drones capture the images, we take the image, we apply machine learning to identify any humans or any activity, and then inform the leadership. That is pretty much the application in a nutshell. But what are the benefits? Let's go into that in a minute. Let's go a little bit more touch on each and every benefit, if I may. As Jayshankar pointed out, health and safety. This is one thing that oil and gas as an industry is getting better, but there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of room to still improve. So, for example, if there is any thermal characteristic, let's call it, that changed over time within the pipeline, you can also identify that, right? So ultimately it will help the health and safety of the workers, the communities around that pipeline, which is even more important, and IOC being partly owned or funded by the national, the government and the taxpayers to an extent indirectly. We also own the safety of the assets and the communities and the people around us. So this would be a great way to identify things before it happens, not after, but as they change, as the thermal characteristics change. If there is a safety issue, immediate notification happens, and then the leadership will be able to do what is necessary now that they have the information in real time. Next, maintenance cost reduction. As we all know, humans can get redundant, humans can get complacent. There is a possibility that we need to carry these manual costs, right? So by doing this, you're actually obviously doing a one-time capital investment, but the ability to do what they're doing with the Geo AI would result in lower maintenance cost. That's really what it is. Revenue protection, what does this mean? So as you guys know, there can be leaks, there can be theft, whether we like it or not, that is a reality. And then this will help us identify the possible revenue losses. So when we say revenue losses, protecting your assets ultimately leads to protecting your revenue, right? That's really what that means. So that is the other benefit. Operation excellence. What exactly is operation excellence? Doing more with less, produce more with lower cost. Isn't that what we are doing here? So what does that do also as a secondary benefit of operation excellence? You would be more attractive to your shareholders, to your communities, to everybody around you because of your operation excellence. Let's move on to methane emissions. I'm glad I chose the order in the way how the survey came out. So this is a map that was generated by GHGSat. This is a satellite image that shows the methane emissions across the globe. And you can see two things here. Yes, there is a higher density here in the Asia region and China, which we kind of know. These are obviously call it developing or almost developed economies. And then it's interesting that the northern part has seen a little higher emissions, and also in China, the eastern part, more industrialized part of China, also has a bit more emissions, it seems. And also Southeast Asia as a whole also seems to be resulting in greater emissions. So this is the concentration that you can see here. In North America, this is the other thing, right? As a developed economy, will there be more stringent / dedicated efforts, if we may, in North America? So think about that as well. So with that said, why is this important? Why are people looking at methane emissions, right? So the key is methane has a global warming potential about 84 times that of carbon. So we talk about carbon that is coming out of the tailpipe from the automotive or any industry, but methane, which is an industrial product, and specifically oil and gas, in the production when they're extracting the oil and gas in the upstream from the fields, it results in a lot of emissions. It's getting better over time, but that is another source where a lot of emissions are released. So with that said, methane as a whole, as one element, a specific element, has about 84 times global warming potential than carbon. So the greenhouse gases, as they call it, methane is one of them, one of the highly potent compounds. Okay, that is why it's important. Now, with that said, how are people using methane data? When I was working at my previous employer, we have it's a $1.5 billion natural gas business that serves about about 10 lakh to 12 lakh customers. And then health and safety of our customers and health and safety of our communities is very important for us. So what we used to do, we actually take satellite images like this, geospatial images, either satellite, or we can have a specific drone looking for the methane frequency, for example, the thermal frequency. And when you look at the spectrum of various things, obviously methane has a specific frequency, right? So you would configure the drone and the camera for that frequency, and then you do a raster, as we call it, which essentially means you fly that drone looking for that specific signal, and then you take an image of that and then bring that back, and then we compare that over time. Why do we do that? Because we also want to do the same thing. We want to identify any possible leaks before it becomes a safety issue, before it becomes a hazard. That is one of the areas where people are using it. And that's why the first benefit is health and safety, same thing. And then protecting the environment. As I said, why do we need to be on the top of this? Because this is, to an extent, it is the responsibility of all of us to leave a better place for our next generations to live. That's also partly the reason why a lot of people are definitely getting behind this mission of making the planet cleaner, leaving a better place for the next generations behind us. And then also revenue protection. I talked about the possibility of identifying a leak. Imagine you are an oil and gas producer with million barrels a day, and that's usually how these businesses are. Okay, a million barrels a day. So what we can do, and there is some set of constant level of emissions that will be released, right? So you can track that. You can take that, and then you can trace the methane emissions over time. If the methane emissions is going up, there is probably a possibility of an equipment malfunction, for example. By identifying that, you are actually creating a planned outage, bring something down, as opposed to losing money on a forced outage, not knowing what is going to happen. So that's what people are using this for. Revenue protection. If you have a million barrels a day, you're using every possible intelligence that you can get, and methane is one of them, or any emissions, as a matter of fact, is one of them. Bringing all that together and then provide a reliability estimate. If that is going to lead into a forced outage, we can stop that. Again, operation excellence, doing more with less. That is the mission here. So I know I'm going to touch briefly on two things. One is agri-tech and then the forestry. So agri-tech, this is a very, very interesting field. We probably didn't hear about this much before. So in the last 10-15 years, there is a lot of progress and a lot of activity in various aspects. And in this case, one of the use cases is about use of optimizing the use of pesticides, I would call it. Use as much as you need. Now, organic is another one, right? Obviously, Landsdoctor partnered with some of the IoT-based devices where they are partnering, where they can understand the environment around you and use machine learning to bring the necessary protection for your crop. Think about it like that. So where are we using? Again, artificial intelligence to optimize the amount of pesticide so that the crop protection can be achieved, but also do that responsibly and sustainably. Okay, so that the production doesn't get compromised for the next crop or even for the later years. That is where a lot of focus is being put on. And then there are also IoT being used for soil conditions. And then not only that, trace and track the condition of the soil and everybody around you, because information is available, everybody around you, and what is the best way to provide the high yield with the best conditions known to that location. That is where geospatial AI comes in. So I even think of it as an ecosystem that is forming around this agriculture. There is robots that are helping the field in more industrialized nations. Whether you do it manually or not, there is a wealth of data that can be gained from the field, from the agriculture, from your asset, and then being used for various benefits, as we talked about. At the end of the day, how do we produce more with spending less? When I say spending less, not just the dollars, but also spending less of your human labor, so that you can use the human labor for something else, right? And that's the key. We'll talk about this. We need to have the mindset of, yes, some of these jobs are probably going to be replaced, but Can we cross-train them? Can we look forward to have a different skill developed? But let me come back to this. So doing more with less is the theme that you see in every use case. Same thing with forestry, without going way too deep into it. How do we help the communities? Because obviously deforestation has to happen, but the key is sustainable deforestation. That is what the nations are working towards. And also sustainable farming, same thing, right? How do we leave a sustainable planet behind us? That is what excites the companies, that is what excites the nations, and everybody around it, whoever is in the industry, to take this forward and then this requires various aspects of it, right? As you saw, a lot of data, synthesize the data, and then go from there. So with that said, for another question, let's go back to Slido, and this time let me open up the second one. Okay, so go back again, slido.com 435876. Question now, what role interests you more in geospatial AI industry? Now that you have seen the potential, now that you saw how people are using it, right? What are your thoughts? What would you like to be? Would you like to be an employee in a geospatial firm? Would you like to be an entrepreneur starting up a geospatial firm, or would you rather manage teams in an established startup? What would you like to do? Nice, nice. I see a lot of entrepreneurial spirit. And I also see managing teams. I mean, again, managing teams is not necessarily a bad thing. That's more of an optimized decision. You know why? Because maybe there might be an established company out there that would like to get in deeper. I like it. And entrepreneurs, we need entrepreneurs, guys. So I want that to be high. So and again, everybody's have their own personal things, and then these things are as of today, right? So don't think of this as a decision that you're taking for a long time. That's not how we should think about it. This is about as of now, what excites you more in the industry. I think there can be a few more. We'll give it a few more seconds. All right. I like the responses. So there is a close tie between leading teams in geospatial firms and entrepreneurship. I like it. And that's great. I mean, that's really what I think we should be looking forward to in the industry. And we see the same thing. We see a lot of not only interest, but there is capital available that can be leveraged if you look at the recent terms. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to stop this. This is great. So there are a lot of interest on managing teams, which means, guys, this is great. When you're managing a team, you need to be broad, right? You need to understand how things work on a higher level. You're not going deeper into the weeds. It's good to know how things work, but when you're an entrepreneur or managing teams, the responsibility is pretty somewhat similar in terms of product development. Okay. However, the difference with entrepreneur, you take a lot more responsibility in funding, yada, 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 all that, right? Obviously, it's a lot more harder. But an established company, managing teams is a very good place to be. With that said, let's move on to the next part of the presentation. So now that we have seen how the industry is using, let's go a little deeper into what does it take to build one like this. We briefly touched on it. I want to actually take it as a process, right? As we said, in this case, I'm using drone as an example, but you can use satellite imagery, you can use the existing imagery sites like Google Maps and even NASA. is another source. And then I also think there is a similar satellite mapping service, EASA for Europe, EASA, just like NASA, but it's European Space Authority. And I also know even ISRO, our own ISRO, have that service. So think about this. We can submit a request and we can get imagery from ISRO as well, from the government, from the satellites that they used, and they will be able to share the data for a minimal amount. So that is the first step, right? No matter what you're doing, the first thing is acquiring that data, geospatial data, like we talked about. Once you do that, the next thing is data processing. You get enormous amounts of data. This is definitely a much bigger job in terms of processing the data, cleaning the data, and then 50% of the time usually is spent on this, guys. So think about this. The fun doesn't begin yet, but a lot of time is spent on processing the data, getting the data ready. We call it data engineering. Why? Because you have to prepare the data in such a way that it makes it easy for the data scientists to come in and do, I would call it the magic. But that magic would not even happen without a great foundation for the data. And billions of dollars are being spent on the data processing, data analysis, by the way. Once you have that, once you have a clean data, now you're starting to connect the dots. That is where most of the data science work comes in. And then here is where you're doing feature engineering, as they call it. What does that really mean? How is like we talked about, global warming is related to greenhouse gases. That's a connection, right? How do they do that? By using artificial intelligence, they actually trace and track the temperature, and then they also see the correlation, for example, with the greenhouse gas emissions, right? And then that is how they actually do that. So the algorithms are usually connected, are usually developed once the data acquisition and cleaning is done. This is the other key. It is a journey, right? This is not a one and done deal. This is not like a typical technology world where you install a server, you get a portal, and then we're done. No, it's not like that. It's a journey. You're on it. You're always improving. Continuous improvement is the key in the geospatial AI. You'll probably get, let me also be clear on the result. You might get 60%, 70% right. And that's okay. You know why? What is the alternative? 50-50. You can take a toss, right? Toss a coin, and then you heads or tail. That's 50-50. Anything better than that, it should be okay. Now, I'm not lowballing. That's not the point here. But the leadership usually should be prepared for that. So look for that signs when you're tracking and talking to someone. Their mindset has to be like this. What are the expectations? If you're expecting 90% or 100% of the result, it might take some time. Are you patient? This is about a journey. This is, again, as I said, you can take sprints, but it is about taking sprints to a marathon. Think about it. A marathon is a 26-mile run. A sprint is usually what? Call it 3-mile sprint. So you take a 3-mile sprint, see what happens, take the next sprint. So think about it like that. Maybe even we call it Ironman, a 60-mile run, right? So that's the way how the process is usually built. Now the next thing is, let's look at it from different perspectives, right? I want to provide, since a lot of people talked about managing a team for an established entity, and some people wanted entrepreneur. I'm going to talk both. For an established business, what you need to look for, you are coming in and then you have a product line and you're making revenues, right? Now you need to make a new product, which means it is, call it a distraction or a detour from what you're currently doing, where you also need to be agile. So meaning quick wins, quick delivery. But also you have a lot of competition where some of these startups or other entities that are ahead of you are going to compete with you, or you're going to compete with them vigorously. You should be competing with them vigorously. And that competition is global. The way, the pace of how these innovations are happening in places like China, like Hong Kong, like Singapore, US, Silicon Valley, the pace is extremely fast and the world is changing. Give it 3 to 6 months, you might have 4 to 5 different players. And again, I'm not stretching it too much. That is how intense the competition is. And the next one is human capital. That is the last part. We're going to touch on that. If you are an established business, everybody wants the same talent. How would you attract them? How would you retain them? The key is retention. Okay, attracting and retaining, both of them are equally important. So, so think about that as well. And then more importantly, if you're an established business, you need to communicate. You need to make sure that your leadership is aware of it for an established business, but your investors, your current investors are also good. So if you're an established business, these are some of the key things. Hire, look at the competition, be aware of the competition from these startups who are moving way fast. And then how do you build a new product? How do you actually, if you have a very stable ship going on, you're trying to create another new, more advanced product, you got to have a different mindset. So think about all that. Now, let's switch to a startup. If you want to be an entrepreneur, finding startup, the first thing, yes, you have to find investors. There is money, so you don't need to put your own money. There is definitely availability of capital, but you have to be, I have to put a concerted effort on it. Attract and retain talent. Startups, they have their own challenges, right? People, whether we like it or not, there is stability aspect, right? So people are going to prefer, even if they don't get a lot of fun jobs, they're probably going to, some people are going to lean or rely on the established brands. It might take a long time, but that is the nature. However, with a startup, the key is the fun, the amount of work and the exposure you're going to get for an upcoming startup, or even if you want to put one, is that excitement, the energy, the ability to bring change to the world. Those are the key attributes for startup, and that's what talent is attracted to. So think about that as well. Business development. And once you have a plan, go execute it. Relentless execution. Focus. Once you do that, go focus, and then don't think of anything else. Do that 3.2 mile sprint, no matter who you are, whether you're an established business or startup, the same thing. 3.2 mile sprint, go, go, go. And then let's look at a different aspect. So now, how are we preparing? So this is where I want to pivot a little bit into how are the students being trained today? So you guys have seen how the industry is using it. We talked about how a business leader for a startup, an entrepreneur is looking at it. We also looked at how the product is developed. Okay, so we have a pretty decent understanding of what's going on. But the most important thing, the people that are doing this, that are being prepared for this, how are they being trained? That is what I want to focus on this slide. We have engineering colleges that are training people on electrical, mechanical, which is one part of it, right? You saw the big circle that I showed you. Yeah, you can use the engineering skills in probably the drones, or maybe if you're a computer science, you're probably coming into either the data analysis or even possibly some part of AI. Then you have business school that kind of looks at a more broad business analysis, but you still need to understand other things. But here is the key. What I am trying to get out of this, what I want to point out to you guys, is the vertical nature of how we are training the workforce. Different verticals. Okay, here is engineering, here is data analytics, here is business school, here is information. But at the end of the day, If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to manage teams, or even if you want to be an employee, you need to be open towards what I call this. Okay, think about your brain in the center. Okay, the industry needs are they want to do more, they want to take a piece of the pie, right? That's what we talked about. And then you got these lateral thinking jobs. What do I mean by lateral thinking? When you were an entrepreneur, what did you talk about? How do I get there? How do I develop a product? How do I how do I deliver the promise to my shareholders, which is I need to get the imagery, get the data, source the data, I call it, clean the data, right? Data processing, and then use AI or data science, and then iterate and then improve. So when you look at it like that, that requires a lateral thinking, I call it. It's not the vertical that you're trained in. It's okay. You can get your foot in the door, but very quickly I want you to think laterally. I want you to think about where are we going to do, what are we going to do, and where are we going to go? What is our destination, and how do I charter my path to that destination? Okay, charter your path, meaning your path is the same as your company's path. So that is a lateral thinking. And what are we getting from the industry, from the education industry? As I said, we are training people vertically, our students vertically. It's good to go into then start the companies, but very quickly you need to be pivoting or lean towards more broader initiatives and whatnot. So with all that said, so I see this as getting ready for the race to future. Okay, so what are the skill sets? This is multidisciplinary training. We saw how broad we should be trained, right? So get more broad on how you need to be trained, but also thinking. There are two aspects here, guys. Training, but keep that thinking process or thought process with you over time. Teamwork. A team is smarter than an individual, right? Okay, many of us are going to be much more smarter than one of us. That is the key. Then as the specialty gets more and more, I would call it exciting in terms of new opportunities, it is about the team that you need. Okay, be part of the team. Think of performing as a team as opposed to an individual. Okay, and then naturally when you bring a team, the performance is going to be a little lower than an individual, but the key is how can you make it better? Lifelong learning, this is the other thing. I mean, people in technology world have this, so I don't need to tell this to everybody, but if you are coming in with the notion of having a specific education, a specific training, and kind of set for the life, I'm not seeing it. That's not how the world is going to be, it looks like. Especially in the Geo AI, this is even more relevant. Okay, lifelong learning. Data science digital. No matter where you are, no matter which company you are, people need to be familiar with the data. People need to understand how to use the data and extract the intelligence from the data, and then be digitally savvy. And things are getting better. And I also would say the technology world is making it more and more easier for everybody to build these applications, specifically by going towards low code and no code options, meaning do not write a single piece of code. We will make these applications happen. That is the trend. That is where the world is going. So if you are afraid or if you're concerned about writing code and not very familiar with the programming, you're fine. Those days are gone when you have to write lines and lines and lines of code to make things happen. Okay, that's not 2020, by the way. So be aware of that. So be prepared to think big, picture and understand what the digital aspect of it that you should be talking about. Business knowledge, this is another thing. Linear training, linear thinking will also not be able to look up and then look at things broadly. I would say you have to have the broad business knowledge. Finally, I would say this is the most important thing, if not one of the top. Storytelling. You need to be able to explain about yourself and understand what you are doing for the business and everybody around you. Okay, so communication. I mean, we talk about that, but I call it storytelling because it is like you explaining it to a fifth grader, right? Okay, so in the US at least, there is a show called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Again, what is the show? Are you smarter than a fifth grader? So why? At a fifth grade level, you actually have a more broader thinking. As you go up, either at fifth or seventh, that's not the point here. Point is, as you go up, you get more linear. So the point is, if you are explaining something like a story, then you would have much better chance of attracting investors, getting your right job, managing, convincing your team members, motivating others. If nothing else, have a fun journey, right? So storytelling is very, very important as well. So that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else after this. I think there is one more way that I would like you to go back to Slido. And this one is about, so let me open it. Open the Slido back up. So now that you have seen the whole thing, now that you understand the potential, what it takes, how do we need to think and how do we need to be prepared? The question now is, what are the areas you would like to get trained? We emphasized a lot on that cross-disciplinary thinking, cross-disciplinary training, lifelong learning and all that, right? So what are the areas you would like to get trained? That is the question. Nice. Nice. Analysis of geospatial data. That is a very interesting field to be in. And it's broadly applicable from Google Maps to SpaceX. Anybody will like it. End-to-end product development, nice. So a lot of people are interested in the analysis. So I see this, or I read this as getting insights from the data. What is the data telling me? I think that's what people are very, very interested about. And there are a lot of even open source softwares that I'm sure Jayshankar will be able to go deeper on this. Yes, there is ESRI that makes things easier. That's one way to do that. The second way would be even QGIS, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where we can also use that. But then even the other thing I really like about this is end-to-end product development. I like that people want to look at it as a big picture. People want to understand what it takes. So maybe there are opportunities for a capstone project type of courses, right? Okay, here is an example. Go build a solution for a specific thing, right? Go build a specific solution for, call it land monitoring or a field survey, or even an optimized pesticide application. I see a pretty good amount of interest for end-to-end product development. I like it. So again, it is a pleasure to see how people are thinking. I like the way how you guys are interacting. I like the way how the thought process is. And I hope you guys got a pretty broad understanding of what is happening in the geospatial AI and what the opportunities are. Oh, so with that said, I will give the floor back to Jayshankar. Go ahead, Jason. Take over. Have any closing thoughts?
Thank you so much, Rajeev. And if you have any questions, we can take it now through the chat window.
Now, if not, what we can do, we can also send a link. We know who actually enrolled, right? We can send them. We can send them a link where they can reach out for further questions or queries. Okay.
Certainly, yeah, certainly.
All right. Anybody has any final thoughts or questions before we adjourn the meeting? My apologies. Here we ran a little bit over, and we lost about 5 minutes or so in the beginning. But it is a pleasure being here and sharing my thoughts and my views on geospatial AI. Thank you very much, everyone. You have a good weekend and have a great life ahead of you. Thanks. Bye.